that's a little bit guy, I just come here.
I was born here in 1938, and we lived here in Waikagama, and my parents and my 5 sisters, and the family, my father's family, and my mother was from Chapel Island. You know, there's a lot of stories, you know, about the residential school, and you know, like, you know, there was hard times by a lot of students, you know, that went there, but I guess it all depends on, you know, exactly what you're leaving, how you were brought up to this point, you know, that, you know, because you start, you know, when you're a child, you start growing when you're born, and, you know, when you by 5 years old, you're supposed to know everything that you will need to know for the rest of your life, even your language. That's what the book says, you know, the research, you know, saying, you know, that if people, for the first 5 years, for the first 5 years, you know, we were very, very much part of our Mi'kmaq language and our culture and our community, and, you know, we grew up in that kind of an environment, which was a really great environment, I thought. We went to grade 8, and then from there we went to Arishat. It's called Our Lady of Assumption Convent. I don't know if you remember that or heard about it. There was, then at that time, you know, I think there was girls, you know, that even came from the mainland that went there. And some of them went to Mabu. And my Ethel and I, you know, the oldest, you know, we went to Arishat. And we just went there 1 year. It's a French school. And we had a great time there. You know, the nuns were great, and we did excellent. You know, we did excellent work, because we were always number 1. There was other students, you know, from Sydney, and the non-native students. This was an exclusive girls' school in Mabu. You know, Arishat I was only there 1 year, the French school. But the following year, I went to Mabu, and there was more students there. They had a great big convent, and there was a mixture of girls from the non-native community, and most of the girls that came from the non-Indian community were from families, you know, who could afford to send their children to a private school. This was a private school, Mabu, and there was nuns, and of course they were just as good as, you know, as I mentioned, you know, the Eskasoni, the nuns that were there, you know, they were devoted, completely devoted, beautiful programs. There was nothing left to be desired, you know, in the kind of education that we had. And when I see what's going on today, you know, and we had all these things, you know, in the schools in Eskasoni, in the Indian schools, like we had special art. We had a special art program, you know, from kindergarten right up to grade 8. And we were involved in those kinds of, we had home economics from the time you were, that's why I'm a good cook, from the time I was 5 years old. We had home economics, and, you know, in Eskasoni, we had great schools, and I think, anyway, other than the fact that we learned how to speak English, but our language wasn't encouraged, you know. Because of course, you know, if the nuns didn't know how to, but they really encouraged, they tried to learn, you know, but it wasn't really involved in the curriculum, you know, like it should have been, you know, well, you know, it wasn't. But it was encouraged in the community where the nuns were, you know, great to teach music and art and everything like that, you know, things, home economics, manual training, you know, for the boys, and a lot of people came out of those schools in Eskasoni when they moved to other schools. They were prepared, for their high school diploma, and most of us, did our provincials and made big marks. Seems to me what I saw, was a lot of success, with Native students. And you could hardly, we lived with maybe half Native girls or I don't know exactly know what the things were, the numbers were. But, it wasn't, there didn't seem to be any kind of, what I felt, like racial tensions or anything like that in our schools there. Because out of those, the nuns used to, and they give out grades, At night we're all standing in this staircase. I mean, they put out the marks every 4 months or something like that. And there was a staircase that went down there, and everybody was lined up there like this. And we're standing, on the doorstep, and the nun would be up there reading the grades for each semester. And if you out down the road until the last one, I thought this wasn't not a good idea really, because these poor people, that made the least marks, were standing there at the bottom. It wasn't very good for them, But I do know that the Native girls in that convent, in that convent where we went to school, there was, you could say 90 altogether, 100 students, and the Native girls always came 1, 2, and 3 in rank, from all those girls that went there. So, we were a force to be reckoned with intellectually. Yeah, I went from Ole Convent, having been there for 2 years. Then I went to Mabo the following fall, and when I came back with all my papers and everything about finishing all my stuff, and I was in grade 10 finishing four major courses and provincials, they didn't know what to do with me in Mabu because I took all my courses, most of the courses I took, so I just took maybe 2 of the ones that I needed, and I got all kinds of other courses, art and music and all those things. I had a real good year. From Mabu, the nuns, they look at your marks, and your, and then, they advise, they counsel, the girls, that are there as to what profession, that they should take. There was counseling. And I was, they looked at my record and they decided, that my road was to go to St. FX. I had, I had the papers and the qualifications to go in there, and that I was to go in the teaching profession. And I did. And I graduated from St. FX in 1960. That's the year my parents moved back from Eskasoni to White-Cogma. I got my degree in 1960, and then of course, you don't know where you're going to turn, where you're going to get the money. You don't know anything about university, That's how ignorant, I don't know, it's not ignorant. You're ignorant for a reason, because you never had the experience. When you're on the reservation, you don't know very much about all these things, because you don't even speak the language out there. My first job was at St. FX at that time. All the students that were graduating were headed for out west. And most of them went to Catholic schools, because St. FX was a Catholic university. And St. FX students were very, very required in Western Canada, because, they had Catholic schools there. Better money, yeah. God, they paid nothing in Nova Scotia. So I went there. I was there for 2 years. And then I worked there, and then that following year, after 2 years, I went to Alberta. I went to British Columbia, close to Jasper, yeah. There was a McBride, Alberta, is where I worked as a high school teacher. And then I came back home. I drove back from Alberta. I was in Alberta, and I came back, And the way it went, it was so easy. You know, I knew the superintendent, you know, who used to look after our funding and all that. When I came back about 2 or 3 weeks later from out west, I picked up the phone. It was one of those phones, you know, that you, in 1960, you know, they didn't have fancy telephones like they do today, but they have, it was across the road from our house on the highway where the phone was. It was a phone booth. There was no phones in Waikagma, just phone booth, one there, and I think there was only one phone booth in Waikagma. And I went there and, you know, like it was, you had to put money in there. And I called this superintendent in Amherst, and he knew me through working with me through the years, you know, like as a student at funding, you know, like he was looking after my funding. And I said, hello. Said, hello. I said, this is Marge. I said, I just came back from Alberta, and I said, I'm looking for a job. Oh, he said, that's good. He said, I have 3 jobs open. Woodstock, Burn Church, and there was another place. Church and there was another place, you know, that I think it was Eel Grande or somewhere like that, eh? And we're just talking like this, you know, just three, he told me 3 places were open. And I said, I'll take Burn Church. He said, okay, the job is yours. He said, I'll send you the papers right now. That's how it happened. That's how few teachers there were in those years, you know. And we were brought up, you know, very strictly. And we were speakers of Mi'kmaq when we went there. And in 1 year, you know, we were completely fluent in English and Mi'kmaq. And this is sort of a blessing too, in a way, because when Mom came home after she was 2 years in the sanatorium, when we came home, we were English speaking. We spoke English. All of us spoke English, you know, after 2 years of being there, and we went to school. Again, there were sisters. It wasn't a big move for us to move from sisters in Eskasoni to sisters at the Indian Residential School. We knew all about them because we had them before.
Đó là cái gì đó bây giờ chú đã đọc rồi đó.